You're good. So, good morning. My name is Alberto Tinti, and I work in the field of specialty contact lenses with a focus on irregular corneas. So, today I will share a clinical and practical approach to managing complex cornea geometries using modern contact lens design. So, as you may notice, irregular cornea sometimes can behave. Where we are. Okay, can behave like little monsters. So let's see how we can deal with them. So today, let me start with two clinical cases. So two very different patients, but one common challenge. So the first patient is 55 years old. He underwent a successful keratoplasty, but he struggles significantly with contact lens wear. So this problem is not only geometric, but we're going to see later, it is also a metabolic problem. So the goal with this first patient is to achieve stable and sustainable lens wear. For our second patient, we have a 72 years old. He had an unsuccessful keratoplasty and has never worn contact lenses before. So a second graft was strongly discouraged. So contact lens solution became the only viable option. So we have two different starting points, but the same underlying problem. So we have to manage highly irregular cornea here. So let's take a closer look at the first case. So this is a corneal topography. And as you can see, it's pretty irregular. So in a situation like this, we're not dealing with just one problem. So I would like to introduce to you the three-headed monsters of post-keratoplasty fitting. So the first head of the monster is regarded to endothelial cells, and we'll see why. So we must always respect corneal physiology. For our second head, we have a corneal asymmetry. So the geometry is highly irregular and we're going to be difficult to manage. And for our third head is for astigmatism, which significantly affect visual quality. So we have all those three heads and we have to manage them at the same time. So let's start with the current situation. So this is the lens that the patient was wearing before. And as you can clearly see, the lens is decentered, is unstable, and the patient reported losing the lens multiple times during the day, making the lens wear difficult. So in fact, the video had to be interrupted because the lens actually comes out the eye. So this is a clear example of poor stability in a highly irregular cornea. Then let's start with the first head. You remember the first head? So endothelial cells. So after keratoplasty, endothelial cell density progressively decreases over time. So this is the donor endothelium at the time of surgery. We are about 2,700 cells per square millimeters. After 1 year, it drops significantly. And after 10 years, it can fall below 1,000. So this becomes a critical factor when we're fitting contact lenses. A compromised endothelium has reduced, as we know, ability to maintain corneal transparency, and any oxygen reduction can further stress the system. So this is why in this case may not be ideal solution to use scleral lenses. So the combination of the lens thickness and the tear reservoir can significantly reduce oxygen transmission. And in a low endothelial cell count cornea, this may lead to additional risks. So basically, situation. So now let's look at the second and third heads of our famous monster. So we have corneal asymmetry and high astigmatism. So the first question is, how do we usually start analyzing these corneas? A common approach is to look at the keratometry values, right? These values are typically measured over a central zone of around 3 millimeters. And they give us an initial idea of corneal curvature and astigmatism, right? But in highly irregular cornea, this approach can be very limited, and we are going to see why. So let's take a look at what keratometry actually does. Here we have a cross-section of the cornea, and basically keratometry actually tries to fit a simple curve over a very small central area. And as you can see here, it fits quite well in the center, right? But as soon as we move outside, we move away from the center, the fit becomes very poor. So this is the problem, basically. Irregular corneas are not defined by the center, but by the entire geometry. And keratometry only uses a very small portion of the available data. In fact, it's interesting to say that we're only using about 11% of the information that a topographer can give us. So we're just ignoring a lot of information from the topographer. So we need a better way to describe corneal geometry. So let's look at the elevation map. Here we're looking at a normal cornea, okay? So this is a normal cornea. So, and we see, can you see those numbers here? For example, we see minus 39, and but what does that actually mean? Minus 39 compared to what? So these values we are seeing here are measured relative to a reference surface called the best fit sphere. And we can see its radius right there, 8.32. So basically, this sphere is generated by the topographer to approximate the overall shape of the cornea. So basically, this shape, this reference represent our zero level, from which elevations are there calculated. Now, if we look at the different meridians, we're going to see plus 36 microns, minus 42 microns, and plus 35 microns. So we can compare the elevation values. Warm colors mean higher than the reference sphere, while cold colors mean lower than the reference sphere. And the difference between the vertical and horizontal meridians give us a direct measure of the astigmatism. But now it is expressed in elevation, not in diopters. So instead of simplifying the cornea like we did with the keratometry, we are now describing it point by point. So with that being said, now that we understand elevation maps, let's look at our patients. So this is the cornea of our patient. So what do we observe? In the superior area, we see a very abrupt transition from yellow to blue. It's really fast. So this indicates a rapid change in elevation, which is exactly what we see in the OCT profile. Can you see that rapid steepening? So in contrast, in the inferior cornea, the transition is much more gradual here, from yellow to green and then to a darker green. So the surface here changed much more smoothly. So this tells us that the cornea has a highly symmetric distribution of curvature and elevation. And this is why the previous lens was unstable. So it was trying to fit a very complex and asymmetric geometry. So the question is, how do we design a lens for a cornea like this? And how do we finally restore vision for these patients? To answer that, the real question is, do we have enough information to design a better lens? Well, the answer is yes, because all the data we need is already there in the elevation maps. So on the left here, you can see the raw data points, the actual coordinates acquired by the topographer. So this is a precise representation of the corneal geometry. On the right, we translate these coordinates into a 3D model of the eye, basically a virtual cornea. And once we have this, we can design a lens that truly follows the shape of the eye. So it's not anymore an approximation, but a real geometry match. So what can we do today is we no longer need to adapt a predefined lens to the patient's eye. Instead of forcing the lens to fit on the eye, we let the eye define the lens of the shape of the lens. So corneal geometry itself defines the shape of the lens. And this is exactly what you see here. A lens that adapts immediately and precisely to the ocular surface. So no more approximation, but by design. So let's go ahead and we can say that creating the lens is, of course, the first step, but simulation is the key. What you see here is a virtual fluorescent simulation of the lens on the patient's eye, even before the lens is manufactured. So basically, this allows us to evaluate the fitting dynamically. We can assess the fluorescent pattern, the clearance, and the rotational behavior of the lens. And we can do this in different positions before anything is actually produced. So basically, this gives us a clear prediction of the real clinical outcome. And if needed, we can modify the design in advance. So let's see the results. So this is the final lens render. And as you can see here, this is this is extremely high asymmetric lens. So this is not a standard geometry. It is a lens specifically designed for this eye. You have to also know, it's interesting to know that the asymmetry reaches over 500 microns. So this gives you an idea of how complex this cornea surface really is and how much the lens needs to adapt to match it. So now let's apply it, fit the lens, and evaluate with fluorescein. So here we are observing the lens without the influence of the eyelids. And what do you see here? Well, you see a uniform distribution of clearance, excellent centration, a good alignment of the reference mark. And I want to point out that this is an extremely asymmetric lens. And if we compare also the dynamic evaluation, compare it to the previous lens, we can see that the new lens no longer dislocates and no longer comes out the eye. So this is a completely different behavior compared to the previous one. But if you remember well, the first head of the monster was the endothelium. So let's go back to the first challenge, the endothelium. So one of the key concerns in lens selection is oxygen transmission. So what happens when we place a contact lens on the eye? Basically, we introduce two layers, the lens itself and the tear reservoir underneath. So both act as a barrier to oxygen reaching the cornea. And this can significantly reduce oxygen availability at the endothelial level. So in a cornea with a reduced endothelial cell density, this becomes a critical issue. So the question is the lens blocking too much oxygen? Well, let's find out, because how do we know if oxygen transmission is sufficient? We can actually estimate it quite easily. So this is the formula that we have to use. Let's take a look. This is the formula, and where the lens thickness is 0.16 millimeters. The decay, so the oxygen transmittivity of the material is 100. This is the material I've chosen. And so if we apply that to this formula, we get 62.5. So this is the decay on T that we have, 62.5. So is that enough? So is this oxygen transmission enough for design? So we can answer that. To answer that, we can rely on established scientific evidence. I'm talking about the Holder-Merz criterion, which defines the minimum decay over T required for a daily wear. And we have to know that this threshold is set to 24. So basically, in our case, the calculated value is around 60. So we are well above the minimum requirement. So this means that the oxygen transmission is sufficient for a safe daily wear. So this fitting lens is this contact lens is approved. But what about refraction? So that's a good news, because the patient achieved excellent visual quality, 20 on 20. He left the clinic satisfied and finally able to wear contact lens again. So now the lens is stable, comfortable, and provide functional vision for everyday life. So this is for our first patient. Now let's take a look at the second case. So here a completely different patient, but the same monsters. Let's take a look a little bit. So this time, the main challenge are extreme slopes and depth. We also have corneal thinning and also refraction. So again, let's analyze the cornea just like we did before. So first, we use the curvature map, right? So we can clearly see a central red area. And what does it mean? It is indicating a very steep curvature. And now if you look at the elevation map, in the inferior area, we see a strong red elevation. So it's like Mount Everest. While in the superior area, as you can see here, you can see a deep blue zone, deep like the ocean. So again, we're not dealing with a symmetric surface, but with a highly asymmetrical cornea. So The first approach that I've used is a soft contact lenses based on the sagittal depth of the eye. So how I designed this lens? First, we measure the sagittal depth of the cornea at a given diameter, let's say 14.8. This can be obtained by the OCT itself. Then we take this height and approximately we add 350 microns, and this gives us the target sagittal depth of the lens. So when we then request the lens with these parameters to the manufacturer, and we proceed with the fitting. So let's fit this contact lens. This is the result, and do you think this is good? Is that do you think that is that good enough? If anyone can spot the problem, as you can see, we have inadequate issues in this area. In this area, tear fluid enters underneath the lens, and this leads to vision instability. So how to fix that? To fix that, we can use the second approach. We can use freeform lens. So this solution is simple. We need to lift the right area and increase the local clearance right where the lens is touching. So let's say we can increase these portions to about 100 microns. And this is exactly what we can do with a freeform design. For the left side instead, here the situation is a little different. Instead of lifting the surface, we need to reduce the clearance. So we locally decrease the sagittal depth by about, let's say again, 100 microns. So what is the result of this modification? This is the result. So the lens now adapts properly to the cornea. The tear film is stable with no abnormal pooling or meniscus information. Now, finally, as a result, the vision becomes stable and consistent. As you can see, these are the parameters of the lens, including diameter, sagittal depth. Also, visual acuity is acceptable in this case, and for the patient is a huge improvement, and that transforms in better life quality. So to conclude, let's take a look at take-home message. So first step, fourth point, irregular corneas cannot be simplified. Also, elevation data allow us to understand the true geometry of the eye. Local problems require local solution, as we have seen with the soft contact lenses. And freeform design gives us the level of control we need. But most importantly, this is really important, behind every cornea, there is a patient. So if we improve the geometry, we are actually improving their quality of life. So with that being said, thank you for your attention. I would like to thank the organizer for the IOC, and thank you for the invitation, and I'll be happy to answer any question if there are not. I hope you like it. Thank you.